I'm here with Brother Vinay. Vinaji, tell us how you first got involved with Ananda Marga and getting initiated.
Well, I actually, my parents being from Los Angeles, we would travel back there every 2 or 3 years with my mother. And I think in 19, well, actually, before that, in Hobart, where I was growing up, for various reasons, I became interested in a type of peer therapy called reevaluation counseling. And um, in the course of one of those sessions, there was a woman, Scottish woman, actually, I remember, who was sort of talking about her life and talking about how she had practiced meditation. And when she said that word, it piqued my interest, and I thought, that's interesting. I would like to learn meditation, whatever that is. So that was in the back of my mind. And later that year, I think my mother and I went to some hatha yoga classes, and that was 1972. And then at the end of that year, we went to the US, and there was a very wonderful, famous bookstore that unfortunately is no longer there in Los Angeles, called the Bodhi Tree Bookstore, which was a large house with lots of rooms full of wonderful esoteric books and self-development books. And I remember being there and picking up a copy of Paramahansa Yogananda's Metaphysical Meditations. And yeah, I was very taken with that. I thought there was something quite special there. And so I was intrigued. And I don't know, I think I might have gone back and bought a copy of Autobiography of a Yogi as well. So then came back to Australia, and in about March, I think it was, of 1973, there's a woman called Sangamitra who was, I think, from originally maybe from Taiwan, but I don't know, Taiwan or the Philippines or something. She was traveling around, well, various places in the world, and she traveled around Australia under her own steam because she'd been to India, she'd seen Baba, and she was very inspired. So she came to Hobart and gave a talk at the Theosophical Society, which my parents were members of, because we used to go every month to these different talks. And so my whole family, myself and my parents and my sister was quite interested in her talk because she was telling these wonderful stories of the mystical experiences. So then there was another public talk that she gave, and she sang some kirtan. And I was very taken with the kirtan. It just sort of echoed in my mind. So pretty much from then on, it was just a smooth, ever deeper dive into Ananda Marga. There was a Dada who came. His name at the time was Dada Dharmapala, now Dharmavedananda. And he came and he initiated me. So yeah, that was the beginning of my Margi journey, my spiritual journey. And at the same time, my mother Asha was involved. My sister, time her name was Columbi, and my father sort of lost interest after some time because he wanted deeper answers, and Nanda Marg was mostly full of kind of young hippie dropouts at that point, and he was in his mid 30s, and yeah, just wanting to ask much deeper questions. He always wanted to meet Nanda, but um, that never happened, unfortunately. So anyway, he went in a different direction. He got interested in Christianity, and then I yeah, got involved in Ananda Marga, and I really loved everything about it. I really wasn't much into my peer group. I never fitted in that much, and didn't really relate to them. And so this gave me an alternative venue for thinking and feeling and exploring, and a community of people who were interesting and wanted to understand themselves and the world. So all of that was pretty exciting for me, and I used to love listening to Dharmapal at the time, his talks. He gave wonderful spiritual lectures, which I found marvelous. And so, yeah, I just plunged into it. And of course, you were there as well, I think a year or two later in Hobart as an LFT. So, we've known each other. Yeah, I just threw myself into it. Used to go to retreats, and it was a great community. It was fun. It was very exciting for me. There was always something to learn. I think, Bubba was in jail at the time, so there were, I think, some protests that we did about that. And anyway, so when I left home, I worked firstly at Ananda Marga, and she was wonderful on an organic farm, biodynamic at the time. And again, it was a great experience of community, and it was very exciting out in the world. And it was a great step from home to that community. And then after that, I went to Sydney and worked at the sectorial office, firstly in a variety of functions. We had magazines, we had Dharma magazine and Horizon magazine, and I worked on those. And we had campaigns and protests, and we did street theatre, and we had a rower house. So there was a lot going on at the time. And that time, Dada Japasiddhananda was the SS, and he was an Australian Dada. At that time, Indians couldn't come in, I guess, because of government restrictions and the emergency in India. So that was also a very, very rich time for me, and very vibrant Margi community. And it was, I have very good memories of all that. Subsequently, I moved to Lismore, had first couple of kids, and we then my first wife Bhavani and I set up a master unit, Ananda Ranjana, beautiful block of land with a few other Margis. And I was there for a number of years, and then later on moved off of that. So I've got a long journey through Ananda Marga.
Right, but what about your first meeting with Baba?
A lot of, Okay, so I'm giving the bigger context. So I was a Margi since 1973, and of course I'd heard a lot about Baba and people's experiences, all very wonderful and amazing. And so I had like 8 years basically of listening to people's experiences of Baba. And then I was working in Sydney at the sectorial office, and at that time, Baba was calling people for Dharmasamiksa, and which is Baba was giving some sort of personal, kind of like a personal contact in public, and giving people directions or asanas or corrections. So it was a special opportunity, and there was a lot of encouragement to go to India. So myself and my mother Asha and another Margi Sundari, who was my mother's age, was also there from the beginning of Hobart unit. So all three of us went to India, and it was an interesting adventure just getting there. So that was 1981, I think, because the flight that we were booked on cancelled for some reason in the last minute, and it looked like electronics. Everything was by hand, the tickets, and it was kind of very complicated. It would be some time till we get another flight. But then later that morning, when my mother was calling up, she talked to the airline, and they said, "Oh, we've got a flight that has to go back to Calcutta, so you can get on that flight." So the three of us got on the flight, and there was only two other people on the whole flight.
Wow.
It was kind of like the flight was designed for us because it was a returning plane, and I guess it had been late or something. So it felt like the royal treatment coming to India. So arriving in Calcutta the first time was kind of pretty crazy. India's a pretty crazy place, and I was like 22 at the time, and I was pretty overwhelmed by the sights and the smells and everything. And then we went to the Jagrati Jodhpur Park at the time, and there's a lot of people there, and everybody was waiting for their Dharmasamiksa experience. So my first experience was just like everything was happening at once. And I was very excited to see Baba because I had heard so much, and I had these ideas that there would be some. I would be jolted by a bolt of lightning or some kind of semi-enlightenment experience or something absolutely stunningly fantastic. I had these dreams of this experience with my guru, who I had this internal relationship with at that point. So at one point, Baba gave darshan sometimes on the roof, and so we went on the roof and went to some of these darshans. And my experience at first was just this sort of it was an Indian experience. It was an Indian Magi experience. A lot of people there, a lot of chaos, a lot of things happening, people shouting, 1,000 people squeezing this little space on the roof. And so Baba comes up, and he's lovely and he's wonderful and graceful and everything else. And I'm like, cool. And so I was sitting there, sort of having this experience, and I was sort of waiting for the bolt of lightning, and I didn't feel it. And I'm like, oh, okay. How come? I thought this was something was going to happen. So then a month passed, and during the month, a lot of things happened, and there was we were waiting for Dharmasamiksa, and there was these darshans that would happen, sometimes on the roof, sometimes in the room downstairs, and it was a rich experience. It was mind-boggling, the whole thing, but I didn't have some experience. I didn't have a spiritual experience that was different than I had in my meditation. It was lovely, and it was great being around all the Magis, and it was kind of cool seeing Baba, but I didn't have some earth-shattering transformative experience. And so I was kind of hoping that my Dharmasamiksa experience would be, the great reveal. And we were waiting for this month. And then the Dada in charge said, Tapeshwarananda, I think it was, he said, oh, this afternoon, definitely. Three of you definitely get it this afternoon. Lunchtime, Baba stopped Dharmasamiksa. He got sick. He was taking everybody's samskaras, and that was the limit. So we missed out. So of course that was pretty disappointing. But I thought, well, cosmic Leela, it's all for a divine purpose. But I was disappointed, and I guess it was also tricky because I didn't really feel like there's anybody I could talk to about what was happening, because I'm just like, well, a lot of people around me are having wonderful experiences, so I don't even know what to say. Because even my mother, she sort of met Baba on the stairs and had some lovely experience. So I was disappointed, a bit bemused, a little bit probably feeling not shame, but kind of like, oh, is there something wrong with me, or what's going on? Anyway, I just took it in my stride. I'm like, well, that's the way it was. And in that trip, we also went to Jamalpur and Varanasi, and I think we might have gone to Patna as well. So anyway, that was 1982, and then in 1984, I traveled with Bhavani, my first wife, to India. We were on a big world trip, so we went to India first, and we went to DMC and Ananda Marga in May. So it was pretty hot. And again, it was a very interesting experience, very colorful, a big pandal, thousands of Margis, DMC. And I thought, this time, got to have this transcendent experience. Got to happen. I was very determined. And again, it was an amazing experience being in that pandal and Baba giving darshans and the Tandava and, the Kaushiki. And it was a big experience and quite wonderful, really. Just being around all those Margis and all that spiritual fervor and the kirtans and such. And I had very nice meditations. Didn't have that a nice experience, but yeah, I just didn't. Again, I left India and it's like, okay, I'm not sure what's going on, but anyway, it's all part of a spiritual journey. I took it all in its stride. So yeah, I was kind of disappointed because I was really hoping for something. Um, I mean, it was lovely being there and doing kirtan, and I was there, but it was a little bit like being in front of Baba's photo, except there he is moving. It was lovely, but it just wasn't different than my normal meditation. So then we traveled around the world, and then the next year, 1984, got married. Got married in July in Sydney, and then in August, I just woke up one morning. I just woke up, and I turned to Bhavani. I said, "I've got to go to India." I just knew it was just some inner like, I got to go to India. It wasn't a sentence or anything. It was just a knowing. So she was very supportive. We earned some money, went to India. I just went by myself. And this time there was nobody there. It was like August. There was, you know, half a dozen Margis there. Um, so pretty much I go to Lake Gardens every day. I would come out and field walk. He'd go back. And then the evenings, often they'd put a chair out for him, and he'd in the garden area, and we'd sit around. It was like maybe, I don't know, a dozen of us, and we'd sit around, and he'd sit in the chair, and he'd say something, and yes, I didn't go with any expectations. I'm just like, well, I'm just here. I'm supposed to be here, and I'm here. And during the course of the first week, I just sort of calmed myself down. I just settled myself. I just like, be here now, be in the present, stop stressing, stop worrying about it. So I did. I just became calmer and calmer and more centered. And at that time, I was, you know, composing Prabhat Sangeets every day. And so, yeah, so twice a day routine, morning field walk, evening field walk. So I was just there over the course of the week, becoming more and more present. And it was always very lovely when, Baba was giving these evening little, he didn't do it every evening, but yeah, it was a lovely, intimate feeling. We sit around in a circle and Baba would say something. So there was one particular evening, I think I've been there about a week, and Baba was talking, and I was watching him talk actually, and the way that I was watching his hands, and the way that he moves his hands was very beautiful, like so graceful and quite exquisite. So I was quite absorbed with just watching him, and so I was absorbed and quite. I was just like present, with no expectations, with like in this very centered, focused way. And it was almost like I could say in retrospect, like a timing, like the exact moment that I became completely 100% present without any other thoughts. Like in that moment, Baba turned and he turned towards me, and for the first time in all these 3 visits, he started talking to me because he had been asking us, well, what do you think of the latest Prabhat Samgeet song? And people were responding, and I said, oh, it's very nice, Baba. So he turned to me and he said, oh, my little boy, what is the difference between nice and fine and beautiful? I had no idea what to say. And he went on to explain. He said, nice is like a taste, like a nice biscuit. Fine is like a material, like a cloth, like a fine. Beautiful is like a beautiful woman. So he said, now, my boy, do you understand the difference between nice and fine and beautiful? So in the course of those, minute or two of interchange, it's kind of like the top lifted off of my head, like all my thinking was completely suspended. I was sort of in some sort of, I don't know, like like I had expanded beyond my body, and I felt like I was, yeah, like sort of filling a much bigger space. Like my identity wasn't just limited to my body. So I was sort of in my body, but I was also kind of connected in a much, much bigger way. Like someone had just sort of, yeah, like opened the lid, and then everything was much bigger. And I was in this sort of amazing state. He went on to say other things, but I was just in this sort of kind of ecstatic state. And when it finished and it was time to go back to Tildula, I got a lift on the back of Jones's motorbike, and the moon was out. And up to that point, Calcutta had always looked to me, you know, like this decaying, dirty, decaying, decrepit city, you know. But when I was sitting on the back of the motorbike after this experience with the moon out, I just looked around. I'm like, oh my God, everything is so beautiful. Couldn't believe it. This was like the same city. I was driving down the streets and I'm like, oh my God. And I have to say, when I return to Calcutta now, I always kind of have that feeling like, it's so beautiful. Like, that's all I can see of Calcutta, really. So that was, a profound experience. That was the experience that I had very much been yearning for. And I did stay another 3 weeks. So there was one Dada Ananda who was from Ananda Nagar, who after that met me and said in a very sort of enticing way, "Oh, come to Ananda Nagar to visit me, and we'll have, we'll go deeper spiritually." And I said, "Oh, that's okay, Dada. I'm really just enjoying my time here with Baba, and it's pretty good, and maybe another time." But Bhadrashananda was very persistent, and in the end, I relented and went to Anandanagar and spent about 3 weeks with him, which was, also one of the most wonderful 3 weeks of my life. We went very, very deep into spiritual practice and spiritual philosophy, and he was the caretaker of Baba's house, so we would sit on Baba's porch, and it was Baba's chair, and it was a very lovely experience. So that was all part of this amazing journey that time. And subsequently, I went to India quite a few more times in the 80s, probably, I don't know, maybe 6, 7 times, several times with my children, three times, I think, with my kids. Kavita was 9 months old, and then I think another time with the 2 girls. That was just before Baba passed away in 1990. I think we went in September 1990. So yeah, I had a lot of other experiences with Baba after that. And I guess that experience, which really, you could say, opened my mind and my heart in a very experiential way, was sort of carried with me into those other experiences, where I then had this much deeper sense of connection with Baba and was very happy to be in his presence. I didn't necessarily need him to single me out, but it was great to be in his presence and feel that flow. And I did also was very fortunate to have a experience of having PC with Baba. That was something I feel very grateful for. And that was also, of course, something very profound. In a way, though, that first experience with Baba was kind of the best in a way, because it was so unexpected. It was like this blessing. And I think in retrospect, it was kind of like, on one level, Baba was saying to me, you know, like, or waiting for me to let go of everything in my mind and all my expectations and become completely present. And when I did that, then he just went, Like, yeah, that's it.
So what are you doing now?
I live in China full time, and I teach Gestalt therapy. I run workshops, professional training, do some corporate consulting, see clients. We have a very, very lovely apartment here in the middle of Shanghai in the old French Quarter. So when I'm not teaching, we have Dharma Chakra here. And there's about anywhere between a dozen and 20 Margis attend. Also, a few of my students and other people who come in who like to come. So yeah, there's quite a great, nice little Margi community in Shanghai as well as the rest of China. And I was talking to my dada, Dhammavedananda, about, I don't know, it must have been maybe 10 years ago or something. And he was encouraging me to find some way to bring my spirituality into my teaching work. And so I decided that I would bring kirtan and a little bit of sadhana into my teaching seminars. So that's been a practice ever since. I often run 6-day workshops, sometimes 7-day workshops, both in China and other countries, Saudi Arabia, Cairo, South Africa, Colombia, all sorts of places. And I always now start the day with 15 minutes of kirtan and 15 minutes of sadhana, and end the day with 15 minutes of kirtan, 15 minutes of sadhana. And, I find people really appreciate it. People really like it. It's a wonderful way to share my practices, way to encourage people to have a spiritual experience as well as the psychological work that we do. I think it creates a very nice, energetic sandwiching, gives them an experience of doing a spiritual practice twice a day. So I'm really happy to be able to incorporate that in the work that I do. Sometimes I run a beginner's retreat here. I've done that, and that was kind of fun. Chinese people interpreted because I unfortunately don't speak enough Chinese yet. Yeah, so that's basically my life now.
Well, thank you very much, Vinay. That was fascinating and inspiring. Thank you. Namaskar.